So welcome everyone who's here so far. I will start off by saying if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, feel free to open up the chat, change the to button to all panelists and attendees and introduce yourself. Let us know the current temperature at your place and how things are going where you are. My name is Jeremy Boychin. I'm the Agronomy Research Extension Specialist with Alberta Wheat and Barley Commissions, and I'm going to be facilitating this fun session today. This is the In the Field webinar brought to you by The Growing Point. The Growing Point is the Alberta Wheat and Barley's extension platform. It's where we provide agronomists and producers across the province with agronomic information relevant to producers at the time to help them make decisions. So we have on today Tom Wolf, who is a spray application specialist with Agrimetrix. He looks at everything from spray drift to pesticide efficacy and sprayer tank cleanout. And he does also partially run Sprayers 101, which Alberta Wheat is a funder for, and it has a plethora of information regarding spraying, getting the most out of your spray. So I highly recommend, if anyone isn't familiar with that website, head over there and see what's over there, because there's a ton of information. So before we get into Tom's presentation, just a few words for those of you who've been on this presentation before, these presentations before, you've heard this spiel, but the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commissions, we really want a hands-on approach to talking agronomy and providing information for producers, and the Growing Point is our extension network for that. And seeing as we had historically over the past 2 years had limitations on gatherings, in the field webinars was a way for us to still bring valuable information to producers and agronomists without that in-person meeting. So hopefully we're transitioning out of that at this point, and we'll be able to have these meetings in the field next year. But for now, we're still providing these webinar sessions for producers and agronomists. So today's webinar, it'll be about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, it sounds like, and then we'll have a Q&A session after that. There's 3 different ways that you can interact with Tom. You can use the Q&A button and ask a question there. It'll come directly to Tom and I, and we can address the question either at the end or through the presentation, depending on how Tom feels. You can raise your hand and we can give you the opportunity to speak into the mic, so to speak, and ask the question directly, or you can use the chat function. And just remember to change your to button to all panelists and attendees. It's on default as just panelists, but we like to see interaction between all of the attendees. So feel free to change that and ask your questions through there. We'll be monitoring all 3 of those options, and they're all found at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And as always, we like to see posts on Twitter, so feel free to take a screenshot and hashtag The Growing Point. We'd like to see engagement and what you guys are learning from these sessions and really what you take away from it. And feel free to tag Alberta Wheat and Alberta Barley. But that is all I have to say, and that is enough of you guys having to listen to me. So I will hand it off to Tom, and I will drift away gently into the background. So thanks, Tom, and thanks everyone for joining.
Great. Well, thank you, Jeremy and Alberta Wheat and Barley, for organizing this. It's great to be talking to you today. We will go over the mechanics of Fusarium head blight application or fungicide application. The likes of Kelly Turkington, Randy Kuchar, and other pathologists in Western Canada will have already communicated how the disease works, how it's spreading, what kind of conditions are conducive to its development. If you've made the decision to apply, then this is for you. Again, thanks to the Commission, and just a little shout out to my partner, Brian Caldwell, who is my business partner in this venture. And unseen, but very busy in the background, is Jason DeVoe, who initiated Sprayers 101 and to whom the commissions, the Alberta commissions, are kindly providing funding support. Okay, so Before we get started, I just want to get some acknowledgements out of the way. This is a compilation of research that was funded over years by the Western Canadian sort of funding infrastructure, notably sort of a compilation of commodity groups and governments, and of course, nozzle manufacturers. All right, the main principles of any fungicide application are as follows. You really have to know your target. You have to know where the disease is going to manifest itself or where it is developing so that you can target your spray properly. You have to know where that target is within the canopy. In the case of Fusarium head blight, we know it's obviously the head and it is at the top of the canopy, so a relatively easy situation. You also ought to know the mode of action of the fungicide you're using. The majority of the fungicides in this space are locally systemic, which means they move in the xylem, not the phloem. They're not widely translocated, so they're essentially contact, or we should treat them like contact products. In other words, they will need to reach the place in the canopy that needs protection. Contrary to some beliefs, our evidence shows that we do not need a fine spray for fungicides. We've done work with droplet size, with nozzle type, and with water volume. And we've always found the water volume to be much more important than the spray quality. So that's actually been a good development, because the larger droplets give us a couple of advantages. We'll talk about a few of them in terms of trajectory in a few minutes, but the other one we won't talk about is beneficial during hot, dry days, so that the larger droplets actually have a longer lifetime on the leaf before they evaporate to dryness, and therefore they have a greater likelihood of being taken up by the epidermis of the plant, and they do have to go in through the cuticle. So then, once you've considered these 4 points, you just select your spray volume and nozzle angle accordingly. So, as I said, in Fusarium, we have a head that is our target. Now, the modern wheat cultivars are bearded, and these awns are worth talking about because they are terrific collectors of fine droplets. And so another reason to maybe avoid the finest of the sprays is that a significant portion of the spray can actually be captured by the awns before it reaches the glooms, and can basically go into the floor where it needs to be, where the fungicide needs to be. Another thing we want to consider is the fact that even though we're talking about T3 timing, there is still an opportunity to protect lower leaves. The flag leaf, the penultimate leaf may still be clean, and they may still benefit from some fungicide. Of course, these Fusarium fungicides are effective on other foliar diseases, and it's worth targeting them at the same time. So let's not forget about that. And of course, the whole staging thing is difficult. There's always earlier and later flowering wheat heads. Randy and Kelly have talked extensively about some of the latest thinking in terms of staging. Let's briefly talk about the spray cloud. We talk about large and small droplets, but all sprays contain both large and small droplets. It's just where the majority of the volume is that we really talk about. The larger droplets are representative of the dose. They contain a significant portion of the dose because they have a large volume in them. The small drops do provide lots of coverage, but it doesn't accumulate to a lot of dose. So you might have hundreds of droplets per square centimeter, but it might only mean a few percent of the total dose, and the actual largest amount of dose is actually in these larger droplets. So fortunately, we get both of these things in most sprays, and which has sort of changed the proportion of the volume in them. The large drops tend to move straight in straight direction, the direction we emit them. They have momentum, and they're captured typically by large targets. They're not easily captured by small targets. A large drop will blow right past an awn, for example, but will impact on a kernel or a gloom. The small droplets will move with wind. They can't really be directed by anything except maybe air assist. And they're typically captured by the smaller targets. They're not as well captured by the large targets, but they love hitting small things. The discussion we always have about droplet size is actually a qualitative discussion. We talk about spray quality. So coarse, very coarse, and extremely coarse are really the modern spray qualities of herbicide nozzles and increasingly fungicide nozzles. We do delve still into the medium sprays, but we're largely going with a core spray. It's a multi-purpose spray. Canopy penetration. Remember the droplets come out at different speeds. So the large droplets, or all droplets basically, are traveling at about 70 kilometers per hour when they come out at the tip. Now, the large droplets have momentum, and by the time the droplets are about 20 inches below the tip, the large ones are still going about 25. The small droplets, though, have slowed down, and they're only going about 7 kilometers per hour. So they've got no velocity left, and so they're very prone to displacement by forward travel speed, wind, and any other thing that happens. And in this case here, we're spraying a field. This is a farmer trial we did east of Saskatoon a little while back, and you can see the operator does have twin nozzles. And you can see how they deflect back, how you really can't see the direction of the front-facing nozzle really, or spray. And the back one is being increasingly swept back. And the majority of the fine droplets that are most visible are extracted from the trajectory from the fan. And you have no control over where they go. They will settle as they please according to prevailing conditions. Now, this is really what's happening. When we travel with a spray plume like this, the large droplets that are at the front of the spray plume, they essentially move with vectors. So they are going down and forward because of travel speed, and they will then essentially move in that general vector. As they slow down from air resistance and are still moving downward, they might actually become more vertical in their orientation. So the higher your boom, the longer time exists for these large drops to straighten out and start going vertical and move only by gravity. And so you kind of lose your opportunity for benefiting from hitting a vertical target on this side. The small droplets typically reside at the back of the plume, as we just saw, and they will go whichever way the wind blows. There's really nothing you can really do about it. You just kind of have to hope they land somewhere. In our trials in Saskatoon, we've used sort of artificial canopies made up of real plants, but these are not real plants. But the wheat plants we actually took off fields and we assembled them in a density that was similar, and we hid targets in the middle of these canopies to try to see if we can affect deposition a little better. But I want to just, before we go into the results, I'd still want to just sort of put this whole thing in perspective. And this is from Kelly. The decision to apply is an agronomic decision. That's your big one. The product you're going to use and the timing is again in consultation with a specialist, perhaps. And remember, the products in this space are not rated for Fusarium head blight control. They're all rated for suppression. And so the application method is a little bit lower on the list because we really can't overcome the basic facts, the disease triangle and the inherent sort of relatively low efficacy of the majority of these products. We're not going to turn a suppression of Fusarium into a complete control just by doing a super job with application. All we can really do is give it a leg up and help it out as much as possible so that it can achieve as much control as is possible for that disease or that fungicide. Here are the 4 principles. I'm going to show you some evidence. First of all, North Dakota State, a long time ago in the 90s, started doing research on angling nozzles, and they found forward or double angled nozzles are the best way to do it. We copied them and basically found the same thing. We did a single nozzle at slow travel speeds, looked at the deposition on a wheat head, front and back side, and found about 2/3 in the front, about 1/3 on the back. This is wraparound. That actually happens, even though you're not spraying that side of the head. When we then went to a twin nozzle, that just like prescribed by North Dakota State, we found that yes, indeed, things are working. This is the forward nozzle delivering this amount of spray, and this is the rear-facing nozzle delivering that amount of spray. When you add those things up, it's nicely distributed to the front and the back, and it's overall more, and the main gain was from the back-facing nozzle actually contributing to this. But that was very slow. So we said, well, no one's going to go 5 miles per hour, and we'll sort of get to that speed thing in a few minutes. greater separation angles of the double nozzle tip or a greater angle of a single tip is better, because you project a more sort of a, horizontal trajectory. This is a narrow fan angle that we did, air induced, so large drops, pretty fast, about 10 miles an hour. And you can see the forward facing nozzle does this and the backward facing nozzle does this. It's not as effective as it was before because we're going so much faster. Now, if we angle that spray wider and use a wider separation, we're getting a fair bit here. So more from the front facing nozzle, and we're getting a little bit more from the backward facing nozzle. So we're basically giving this nozzle more opportunity here. When we add this up, we're exceeding the benchmark that we showed you before in both front and back. It's still uneven, but it's partly because we're going fast. Coarse sprays are the only sprays really able to maintain the direction. So when we go to a fine spray like this one, and we have a fairly wide separation, we're going pretty fast, we're seeing this kind of a deposit. So actually not bad. In fact, more came out the back in this particular experiment. Remember, these are all different experiments on different days. And so that sometimes doesn't always agree with something that we just saw a minute ago. When we go coarser, same everything else, look at the increase in deposition from this forward-facing nozzle. So the direction that we're pointing the spray is maintained and it hits the head. The backward-facing nozzle, maybe not any better. So we didn't really benefit from this one as much. It's about the same as it was before, but we certainly benefited from the front one. Low boom heights are really the key criteria for making these first three principles work. When we went to a single nozzle system on simulated weed heads, we did 3 boom heights. We did the 30-inch boom height, the fine, medium, and coarse sprays here. You can see the coarser ones did a little better in terms of deposition on the head. And then when we went to a lower boom height, we almost doubled the deposition. We had nice separation now between the fine, medium, and coarse. The coarse ones benefited more from the lower boom. And then, of course, we went to maybe a boom that's unreasonably low, but we wanted to try it, and we again added more deposition. So this is all about the nozzles, or the droplets actually moving in the direction that you want them to. We then did this. This was outside of a canopy. We repeated that work later. We did a twin. This is the Wilger twin, and we looked at a 20-inch and a 30-inch height, and this is now within the canopy. So this principle of the lower boom height depositing more on the wheat head, the upper is the wheat head, is absolutely true. 20 inches above the wheat head versus 30 inches above the wheat head. So it is worth it to do whatever you need to do to keep your boom low. Maybe it means traveling slower. Maybe it just means a few other changes to your system. There's no real advantage or disadvantage to a lower high boom when we get into the lower canopy. So the flag leaf and the penultimate leaf still had the same amount. So we're really just addressing the issue with the trajectory of the angled spray. More water is important. More water does give us basically more droplets. So especially now when we're getting a little deeper and with some of this residual spray for lower leaves, that's important. Otherwise, we don't see a lot of benefit on the wheat head itself. It's really just a coverage, droplets per square centimeter. Now, what about, how much coverage do we actually need? The water sensitive papers that Syngenta sells have a number on them. They actually recommend 80 droplets per square centimeter. My partner in Ontario, Jason DeVoe, agrees with that number roughly. I've decided to draw a line here at 100 drops per square centimeter. And just to give you an illustration about what our droplet density is with, fairly fine sprays and slightly coarser sprays and even coarser sprays. And it really only becomes critically low when we get to the very, very coarse sprays. And even then we can recuperate some of that coverage by adding a little bit of water. So, I might be splitting hairs here, but this is basically more coverage than you need. You don't benefit from that. You've got more than enough, and enough, and so this gives you that opportunity, again, as I said earlier, to spray with a lower drift spray, slower evaporating spray timing issues. And then, of course, here, this is just exaggerated a little bit. I just repeated that same graph with just the separation of these two. It's not, as I said, I don't want to split hairs here, but I think you get the point. Nozzle-wise, The twin nozzles are kind of the go-to system here. And there's been some asymmetric nozzles that have a slightly lesser angle from the vertical for the forward facing nozzle and a slightly wide, more aggressive angle for the backward, because the back facing side needs the help. We tested this particular nozzle. This is called the TJet AI3070. And you can see here is the front of the head, the back of the head, and the total deposition on the outer side here. This is the asymmetric. Here's a conventional twin, and here's a single. Statistically speaking, not a lot of difference here, but maybe a slight trend for the asymmetric to do a little better. The single nozzle did remarkably well, but you can see that it didn't distribute the spray as evenly between the front and the back, where the twin nozzles improved on that, I think, noticeably, if not significantly. Travel speed, not a lot of difference. So we were able to go up to 10 miles an hour and see really quite a level amount of deposit. This is good. Even the distribution between the forward and the back wasn't affected by travel speed. And I think that speaks volumes for the asymmetric design. Boom height, we had the same results I showed you already. I just want to reiterate, 30 inches, 20 inches, and 15 inches. And look at that, we possibly doubled or even tripled the overall deposit by lowering the boom and allowing those angles to work a little better. So that's one of the main lessons. I want to go into some nozzle choices, and I've divided them into two groups. One of them is air-induced twin fans. There's quite a large selection of them. This bottom right is the one I just showed you. That's a TJet AI3070. It's air-induced. It has a very good spray quality, quite like it. Why don't we just keep going here? This is the Lechler IDTA. This is also an asymmetric twin fan. It is now sold through Lechler directly as a plastic nozzle, and also through Hypro and John Deere with ceramic exits. So a bit of a premium nozzle there, but a very nice design. Very similar in terms of spray quality to this one. Lechler also makes a small one. This is the IDKT. So injector nozzle, Düse is German word for nozzle. Compact twin is what that stands for. So nice, compact, very good system. Albaz is a French manufacturer. They're characterized by a pink ceramic exit, available now through Greenleaf. And again, a very good tip, one of the first compact twins that is in one single nozzle body. Greenleaf also makes sells a German nozzle. This is the AgroTop. This is the Turbo Drop asymmetric dual fan, and it's a very nice design. Hypro, John Deere have the Guardian Air Twin. And you can also always get any configuration put together in a twin cab. And I didn't put them on here, but there's other, versions of angling nozzles together. But this is perhaps the most popular one. All of these work. If you have a PWM system, you have a few other choices. Let's start on the top left this time. The benchmark really for PWM is the Wilger. Most of the original PWM systems were on cases, and cases had the Wilger body. And so you have the Wilger adapter here. They have a Y, it works. You can put a different nozzle size on the front and back if you want to, you don't have to. Hypro, John Deere have come up with a single twin nozzle. It's called the 3D. I have not been recommending this one as much as I'd like because it's a little bit too fine. Conventional pressure sprays about, medium to fine sprays, and you really have to lower the pressure quite a bit. Good news though, is they've developed a low drift version of this very nozzle, which is waiting for it to hit the market. They also have a very similar nozzle, the Hypro Guardian. John Deere calls it the LDX. It's a nice compact tip, drop size about the same, not as aggressively angled though. A new one that's very interesting is sold by Nozzle Ninja in Stettler. This is the AirAg TFLD. This is a twin, not air induced. So here you go for PWM. The main issue with it, it only comes in 05 sizes and below. It doesn't come in larger sizes. So you would have to travel a little slower to get the 10 gallons on. Brand new one from TJet is called the AccuPulse Twin Jet, APTJ. This one I put on here, but I don't expect it to be a very important nozzle for Fusarium because it's ultra coarse. It's actually, I believe, looking for a dicamba market. It is perhaps coarser than we want. I've got my samples. I have to spray them and maybe report back. They also make some air-induced ones. TJet has the TTI 60. It's a twin. It's also a dicamba nozzle. This one is air-induced, but they've okayed it for PWM. This is a pretty good one. This is the AITDJ 60, air-induced, works with PWM, not as wide a separation of fan as we'd like to see, but a nice droplet size. It's a very good nozzle all around, actually. And then, of course, this is a very much a strong standard for twins. Again, not a very strong separation between front and back, but a little bit finer, a little bit better coverage perhaps, and still relatively low drift. It works at low pressures. Excellent nozzle for PWM. In Ontario, they looked at a Turboflood. So they put a drop tube on this particular experimental unit, and then they spray a nozzle forward and the adjacent one backward, achieving a twin kind of spray. The nice thing about this, pretty coarse and very aggressively angled forward and back. So boom height absolutely critical here, but what a cool idea that is. Okay, I want to maybe just say a few things about aircraft. Aircraft are not able to sort of use a twin system and project the spray forward and backward. They do work. They absolutely will get the spray on target. They will get the spray on target on time, and I think that's their key advantage. If you have to get moving, that's your ticket. So don't discount them at all. The ideal application and closing, correct staging, obviously, that's an agronomy question, but scouting, talking to the experts in pathology about what the latest thinking is. Low boom is essential. I'm setting the bar at 20 inches. I mean, I know that may seem achievable, but you may misjudge your boom height from the cab. Twin fans, absolutely proven to work. Wider separation is better. Coarse to very coarse spray quality, so it's a blue and green color in the color scheme, because of you want the twin fans to have a reason for working, and of course not too fast. I think we can probably go somewhat faster because of the easy access of the target at the top of the canopy, but you will harm the backward facing jet on the twin fan. And 10 to 15, the labels for these products typically let you go as low as 10. But more water is always an advantage for just simply better robustness of the overall application if you can swing it. So that's according to my stopwatch, that's been 23 minutes. I want to just thank you again for listening in today. I'm open for questions.